Hi, in this lecture, I want to talk about the essays of James Baldwin and Ta-Nehisi Coates. And specifically, I want to talk about how these authors do important and original philosophical work in their essays. So one of the things that we've talked about is the kind of unsteady character of the genre of the essay in the sense that it lies somewhere in between literature and philosophy. And some people have looked at that rather dismissively and said, well, philosophy is where all the interesting and innovative conceptual work gets done. And then essays are written for popular consumption. And there's no real original thinking happening in them. Rather, they are, as Hume, to paraphrase Hume, they are a kind of emissary between the world of thought and the public. So I want to challenge that by looking at some of the original work, important philosophical work that these authors do in their essays. So a lot of people have said what Toni Morrison says in this quote. She says, I've been wondering who might fill the intellectual void that plagued me after James Baldwin died. Clearly, it is Ta-Nehisi Coates. So if you've been reading anything about these essayists, you will likely have encountered this comparison. And likewise, you may have encountered people denying the comparison. So these are critiques of Coates, and they're also critiques of the comparison between Baldwin and Coates. So authors say, Coates can't bear the weight of this comparison. He only writes for white people. He says nothing new, right? There's no new ideas in this book, Between the World and Me. He doesn't offer a positive vision of resistance. He doesn't offer an adequate analysis of the economic dimension of the problem of race in America. And there's no real historical parity between the two figures. James Baldwin was writing in the 60s and was standing shoulder to shoulder with figures like Medgar Evers, Malcolm X, Martin Luther King Jr. And so some people have dismissed Coates as an important author and say, oh, he's just writing this for white people so they can kind of understand the legacy of white supremacy, but he doesn't really do any novel or interesting, important philosophical or conceptual work. I want to suggest to you that this is representative of a kind of academic arrogance that denies the ability of the essay to do important philosophical work. And I want to try to show you as clearly as I can some of the important conceptual and philosophical work that both Baldwin and Coates do in their essays. But I think this disparages and dismisses the important philosophical work that the essay can do. At least that's the case that I want to make here. So my presentation is divided up into 4 sections. First, I'm going to give some sort of background to the work of these Black essayists by talking about an essay by Gerald Early, who's a Black essayist himself, talking about some common threads in the writings of Black essayists. I'm going to talk about James Baldwin as a conceptual innovator and what you might call a conceptual engineer. I'm going to talk about how Baldwin's concept of race is now quite a prevalent one in the philosophical literature. I'm not going to trace specific links between Baldwin's account and the contemporary literature. I'm just going to say that the view that he was developing in the early 80s is something that is now quite prevalent, almost a dominant view in contemporary work on the concept of race. And then I'm going to talk about Ta-Nehisi Coates' account of life without race. And that will make more sense once I get through the discussion of race and the concept of race that Baldwin advances.